video's over. We're sorry for those audio technical difficulties here. We're still all learning all the time.
Things happen, and I'm glad we're able to provide some overview. Yeah.
We got Josh too. We got the trifecta of there. Okay. All right. We're good. And we even got Chris here. This rocket. So we got the quadruple panel here.
Awesome. Well,
so what are we talking about? Y'all talking about stuff? Is that what's
pretty much, man. I threw some notes together and then I just crumbled them up and threw them in the trash can and let's just get on and kind of just talk, right? So no, we're excited. So Bruce and the team here are obviously from Citrix IT. So we'll have them kind of do a kind of round the horn real quick and just introduce themselves and kind of talk a little bit about what they do, and then really just talk through kind of day in the life. And I have some kind of queued up questions, but we really want to make this open to the folks that are out there and listening, because if you always wondered, a lot of people look at Citrix as just kind of the software company that's providing their secure workspace, right? But they look at it, they have a different persona, a different perspective, right? Is they're managing end users in the environment, right? And it's just kind of a different perspective. So it's they're in your shoes, right? So everyone wants to know how Citrix is running things. So that's kind of the deal today. It's just kind of fireside chat. So with that said, we'll start with Bruce. If you can just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of what you do, and we'll kind of pass it around, and then we'll jump right into it. But to the folks out there, definitely ask questions. We'll queue them up, and just to kind of set the stage. I mean, obviously, like any large enterprise, right? You want to have what security product are you running? What hypervisor? They obviously aren't going to be able to answer direct questions like that, but more generalized things, unless you guys can, but I'm pretty sure that's not the case, right? So, but yeah, Bruce, go ahead and kick it off, man.
Yeah, I'll let Josh determine what we can and can't answer sometimes, because Josh is Josh
give
is my boss.
Up. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm an L3 ops guy. So basically, I'm one of you guys, right? Any other place would call me a Citrix admin or a Citrix engineer. But basically, the team you see here runs Citrix for Citrix. So we do your CVAD deployments, the full stack. We're using everything. So just a L3 ops guy doing Citrix for Citrix is the basics of what I do every day. I keep that short and sweet.
Sweet. Awesome. Yeah. So I guess we'll go. Joshua will run down that way.
Sure, no problem. You able to hear me okay?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Awesome. Man. Beautiful. My name is Josh Lindquist, Director of End User Computing at Citrix, which I always do have to specify and reiterate, as you said, that's within Citrix IT. At any other company, it would just be assumed I'm talking about IT. But then I get people asking me what designs I'm putting into products. I'm like, no, that's not me.
Where's this feature?
Yeah, exactly. So in the case of my overall team, we're responsible for all of the end user computing devices and environments within Citrix, and that includes not just virtualization but physical side as well. We have the extra pain of also having a heavy Mac laptop presence as well, and most of our endpoints, physical endpoints, are laptops. We don't have a lot in the way of desktops, which makes things extra fun. So happy to touch on anything related to the entire stack, because we actually do use a lot of our own products even to manage the physical device space as well. So if anybody has any questions, we're happy to talk about that as well. But other than that, I've got a rock star team of very motivated and creative people, and I'm happy that we're able to come here and share any info or knowledge on how we work, if it can be beneficial to the rest of the community.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thank you for that. We're excited to have you, and I'm excited actually to kind of dive in, and once we finish the intros here, about exactly what you said. Like, everyone wants to know, like, what's Citrix running, right? So, but yeah, I guess Chris, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, and then jump in to Sean there.
Sure. My name is Chris Strauss. I was actually a architect and developer for IT, specializing in the Microsoft .NET stack for years.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, and then we came up with a pretty cool and innovative platform and workspace called MicroApps, and I was pretty excited to check it out, and I migrated over to that team and cherry picked, because I was interested in seeing what the product was about and developing use cases for MicroApps and for Citrix to make their work easier. And so I went from a coder to a semi-coder / use case developer at Citrix.
Sweet. Yeah, I definitely have some questions about that, which I'm excited to get into, because that's kind of a newer deal that Citrix has been putting together, and a lot of people kind of feel like it require like a lot of these like development skills, right? And so it'd be interesting to kind of see how Citrix is using that in production. So, what about you, Sean? Am I pronouncing that right? I'm doing like
That's
the
right. Yeah,
I'm just doing and then I'm like trailing off. I don't want to mess it up.
I've heard that bird in my whole life, Shane. Don't worry about it. So first of all, I just want to say thank you for having us here. It's my first time speaking in this group, and really excited to be here. But to move on for that, I work for Josh under the Workspace Platform Services team. I've been at Citrix quite a long time, made my way through the different teams and whatnot, but landed in a happy place here on our virtual platform team. And I do a lot of design and architecture work for the team, including anything from CVAD to Workspace or whatever you want to call it, for our internal customers. So happy to deploy those solutions, get the feedback, really drive user experience and see how we can improve the product.
Sweet. No, that's awesome. And I'm actually excited to talk a little bit about that too, and how Citrix approaches a project, right? And I think that's going to be an interesting conversation. So I guess we'll kick it off. Patrick, what do you think? I think we'll kick it off, just kind of maybe Joshua or someone on the team here can kind of talk a little bit about the lay of the land of what you guys are kind of running. What's Citrix running internally?
Yeah, because I think that's what everyone thinks is like.
What aren't we running? What aren't we running, right?
And there's going to be version questions I can feel. So like, I don't know if 6.5 still lurking in the closet over there for some.
Yeah, you got a 4.5. You know, you got a nostalgia, a 1. You got an XP running in there or something, right?
They're on DOS somewhere over there.
Let me tell you, I joined Citrix 2 years ago, and having been a Citrix IT person for 20 years before that. That was something I was super interested in seeing myself is, are we rocking presentation server and Metaframe anywhere in there? I'm happy to report Citrix is the first company I've worked at that does not have any of those cranky legacy, super unsupported environments around.
Nice.
Although, I mean, what is interesting is it's also the first company I've ever supported that has 2 full-blown dedicated production environments. Just get this one out of the way, right now, because that's probably going to launch off into a lot of other questions. Sometimes people ask us, are you running LTSR or are you running CR? The answer is both. We actually have 2 full-blown production environments where, one, the primary user base are people in the development and engineering areas, the product managers, the people who actually help develop the products. A lot of our sales engineers and sales teams are on that environment. And the intention is they're all living, eating, and breathing the absolute latest bleeding edge, the latest features, the latest bugs. So those things can, be fine-tuned and tweaked early on, and everybody gets a solid experience. Then we have all of the same internal departments that every other company has. We've got HR and finance and sales and all of the other areas. They don't need latest and greatest. They just need super long-term stability. So they're all running on LTSR. From a product mix perspective, I'll let the rest of the team get into it. Literally everything. I mean, on the physical side, we are running Citrix Endpoint Management, for both mobile and Mac device management, for example. We do use NetScalers heavily, both the physical NetScaler gateways as well as the cloud service versions. We do use the Citrix Cloud Management plane. We do have some storefront instances. So you name it, we've got it. We can talk about it.
Yeah, and then I guess just so talking, like, obviously you guys are running like multiple products across the stack, and I think some of the team, we already have some great questions coming in about image management and things like that, and I think a good one that just kind of staying in the topic of the lay of the land is there's some questions about what % of the production environment do you have in like a public cloud? Is there any? Are you starting to experiment in that space? Is there anything like that you can share?
We're actually working on multiple clouds right now. We do have solid partnerships with both Microsoft and Google, and there's actually heavy development happening in both spaces, including things like PVS, app layering. I'm probably not supposed to talk about a lot of stuff, but suffice it to say,
preview is public, so if folks.
Yeah, and actually, this is one of the other cool parts about working in Citrix IT is we're referred to internally within Citrix as customer one. And the engineering and development, the product teams come to us when they're developing new products or new features, or coming to do a revamp of an existing product. And they say, how does this work for you? What's good? What's bad? What's awesome? What's ugly? And you can ask Bruce. We're pretty honest with them.
Yeah, no, I'm glad actually. Being customer one, if you're like, hey, shit works, it's great. I mean, I don't even know what we would end up with. So I'm glad that you guys are really being that first customer and pushing back, and that's great.
Well, and again, another thing I'm super happy, to be able to report in my time at Citrix is, and they listen, they love it. They thank us profusely, because the mindset of how something works best from a developer perspective is very different from somebody who runs the stuff day in and day out, and they know that. So, we give them that feedback, and that's one of the reasons, we're happy to be a part of groups like this, where we can also hear from others and provide that feedback back to the engineering teams as well. But as far as public cloud goes, yes, we are in both Azure as well as GCP. There's more and more feature set coming to both, which obviously the goal is to have parity there. And for our purposes, again, just if it's a point of interest for the customer base, one of the reasons that we are pursuing both Azure and GCP is because our customers are using multiple clouds, and it makes sense. We should implement that way. We could have gone simple and gone with a single vendor and simplify the environment, but in reality, there's real use cases both within Citrix and for our customers for running multiple clouds, and what kind of interoperability do you have, and when you're going to have device enumeration and management plane traffic split between clouds, how should that route? Should that go from Google to on-prem to Azure, or should we set up direct connects between the two? These are all things that we're working through now. And what's cool is we've got the product documentation and architecture teams that are working with us on our implementation, and they're planning on producing a bunch of documents and case studies on it to
Josh,
provide. Sure, go ahead, please.
A bunch of people in the comments saying that the screen went black, and somebody's saying to refresh the screen if it's black or something.
Oh yeah, no, it's good to bring that up. Yeah, it's clear for me. So
yeah,
I see you guys clear, but yeah, there's a bunch of people saying they're saying it's fixed now.
Okay, cool.
When in doubt, refresh.
They were saying that you said something we weren't supposed to say, Josh, and somebody pulled the plug.
Yeah, that's exactly.
I think we had a wire. How is that? We got a wire cut.
Somebody hit the dump button. Well, actually, it's a good opportunity for me to pause. We keep going.
No, I think that's great feedback, because I think a lot of people. I know, obviously, my side as a consultant, I'm working with a lot of customers, and we're seeing a lot of the same thing that you guys are talking about. So that's cool to kind of see that matchup. But I think just for a second, I think it would be cool to kind of talk a little bit about how you guys. You had mentioned being kind of customer one. Like, how do you approach kind of deploying some of those new products? I think you guys have like what's called like Prod 0. Right? Like, how do you go about deploying a new version of Citrix, rolling it out to the end users, gathering feedback from those users? What does that journey look like for you guys?
Sure, I'll touch on it briefly, and happy to let the team jump in as well. We go with a ringed release architecture, which is effectively we go through a dev, QA, UAT production, except in our case, it's Prod 0 is our first production environment running CR, and then Prod 1 is our LTSR production environment. Those are actually set up even on the Citrix Cloud to receive the updated code in that order. So again, we're running just as all normal customers are. So when it's time for a code push to happen, it comes through. And depending on whether the product just natively comes alive with the code, or whether it's a feature toggle that you have to go into into your admin control panels and enable it, will obviously depend on how it goes in. But early burn-in test environments are usually kept within the product engineering and development spaces, because that's where they're just doing their quick and dirty testing, etc. When they feel it's ready for prime time, we'll roll it out into our first production environment, which is Prod 0. And yeah, we are absolute believers in drinking our own champagne. So all of IT, all of engineering, which includes the product development side, most of sales, all the sales engineers, we're all in there, and we all provide huge feedback. There's a tremendous number of feedback channels available to us internally, where we say, hey, I'm using this, it's not working well, or hey, I'm using this, and I think it'd be better if it worked this way instead of that way. And a lot of times those feedback to those teams turns into action, and then what actually comes out the other end into the full-blown customer production environment incorporates all that feedback. Once everything's convinced it's stable and good, it gets promoted to the next one. Sorry, Bruce, go ahead.
Yeah, a real quick example of that is, so I mean, we've been running Citrix Cloud since I got here about 4.5, 5 years ago. And one of the initial complaints I had was, you guys are pushing Cloud Connector updates at random times, right? Like, I'm an IT shop, I file RFPs, I file documentation. I can't go push updates at 2 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon. So we complained to product management and said, no IT shop wants you to push updates at 2 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon or anything like that. We want to set our update schedules.
Nice.
So it took a little bit, but if anybody's running Citrix Cloud, you'll notice if you go into your Cloud Connectors, there's now an option in there to set when your Cloud Connectors get the push from Citrix Cloud when they get updated. So that was, so it wasn't a barrier for, I see Ryan posted in there, that was 100% a barrier for us. So we don't have barriers. It's literally given to us, and our barriers then turn into barriers for engineering. We go to them and we say, logically, I came from a large insurance company. Josh came from a large bank. Any large customer is not going to want to do this. This is not acceptable to us. We can't document changes. And that's been changed since. So yeah, to your point about feedback, we absolutely, and Josh calls me a bull in a china shop sometimes, I provide very direct feedback to product management and tech support and things like that about my belief of a product. So
that's awesome.
Does that mean y'all have like open like an official Citrix case? Do y'all call the 180?
Oh yeah.
I
I just got off of an MI, or what we call a major incident. Some people call it a SEV1 or a P1 or something like that. I use the same tech support that you guys use. When you call in and open a tech support case, I call in and open a tech support case. I have to explain the issue.
TRM? Have they upgraded your support agreement so that you have a TRM?
I do have a TRM, but I promise you, I call into the same exact tech support. I get the L1 tech support, and all of that the same way that everybody else does. The only thing slightly different is if I to someone's previous question, I support the entire business. So if tech support goes down, I seemingly get an extremely high level of tech support because tech support's down, right? And if tech support's down and you guys aren't getting call-in support, then I get the escalation engineers very, very quickly.
So no VIP card for Bruce.
Yeah, there's no VIP card. I promise you, I do use the same support that you guys do.
No, Bruce's VIP card is that and this is God's honest truth, he will threaten the tech support people with going and shutting down the VMs that they're running on. I swear to you, I swear to you, if he doesn't feel he's getting the level of escalation he needs, he has not been shy about saying, well, if I shut off all their VMs, I'll bet they're going to get on real quick. And I'm like, Bruce, no.
I see you're running these 5 apps right now.
I have threatened tech support that if I'm having a Zen desktop issue and they're coming back saying, well, we're not seeing the issue, I very quickly remind them that, well, I can switch you to a pool that is having the issue, and then we can go over it from there. So threats like that have been communicated, if you will. But
it probably helps drive, I think, some of the, I mean, just like any support organization, typically, I mean, a lot of the time you might end up with someone that is asking some of these basic questions or just driving you off the wall and whatnot. But I think some of that conversation probably is driven, like, as you guys, that's why they're probably having you go through the same support line that a customer would go through, so you can help provide that feedback and help tune that level 1 experience so it doesn't piss everyone off.
We do provide feedback for tech support, right? If we have a bad experience, we express to tech support, we had a bad experience for here. I waited 10 minutes on a phone call. No customer should ever wait 10 minutes to get an initial call in. So from our standpoint, yes, we're Citrix, but we're also a customer, and we have no issue providing direct feedback to anybody inside of Citrix and telling them, as a customer, I would be down your throat right now. So that gets communicated.
Nice. I like it, man. I like it. So we had one question here that came in just related to kind of like endpoint devices. Now, are you guys supporting remote access from other devices like tablets, smartphones, etc.?
Everything.
Everything.
If you work here, you can connect in with an iPad, an Android tablet. We do have people on Chromebooks out there. We don't really have any restrictions at all, because even if your device doesn't have a dedicated FAT app, you can use the HTML5 I keep wanting to revert back to receiver Citrix Workspace app. We let everybody connect from everything. Some areas require more support than others, but it's probably universal.
Sure. Yeah. Phil had a comment, which I think would maybe you guys can chat with the Tech Zone folks or something, or even get with on the podcast that they have there. I think would be kind of cool. But there was kind of a comment just about, hey, it'd be cool to kind of see a white paper on kind of customer one.
That's actually what we're working with the technical marketing teams now, particularly on our cloud implementation journey, and that's one of the end goals is for use cases and documents to get produced, walking through at a technical level how we went through our journey, what issues we ran into, how we got around them, and how we ended up in our target state.
Yeah, I think the big one that's like echoing in my head is MCS or PVS.
We actually just had that conversation. We actually just had that conversation and are going through an extensive list of pros and cons. Actually, there's probably really no cons, but it really comes down to what's best for your environment and your enterprise, right? Yep. Because you'll get
consultant answer. I like it.
But it's
that's
true.
The God's honest truth. The conclusion that we came to is it totally depends on the use case, because we were doing the same thing. We're like, okay, what's the slam dunk, strategy for us? And the end result was it really depends on what we're trying to do and in which environment, because they're kind of interchangeable. It's not, well, this one's clearly better always in this scenario. It's really not.
That y'all are using like a mixture right now that you have, because I can always see, especially with as many locations and offices and geographically you're spread out all over the world, is that your LTSR and your CR environment are probably sprinkled across everywhere, sprinkled a little in the cloud. And then MCS lends itself really good when everything's close and you don't have to replicate snapshots. But PVS, when you've got multiple data centers, just copy that PVP file and the AVHD file, and you're like off to the races.
Yeah, no, my environment's mixed PVS, MCS. So I've got app layered PVS desktops that are running in every region, and I've got non-persistent managed desktops that live in the same region. So depending on the user's persona or use case, they're either getting a semi-persistent app layered user layer PVS desktop, or they're getting a non-persistent managed desktop, as well as the XenApp deployment is, I believe, all switched over to PVS.
It's both. It's both.
Do we still have? Okay.
Yeah, and just to touch on that too, like the beauty of the app layering product that we're using is we export our layers and they replicate across the globe. So when we have Elms and everything, it's one click to run to produce the MCS master image or the PVS vdisk, and we don't have to do that 4 times. We have to do it once in one region, and that's the simplicity of it, and makes it a lot easier and faster for deployment.
Yeah, because that's what I've always wondered too, is like what kind of special sauce and automation you have. Because I know so many people, it's like vdisk replicator is like as far as they go, right? Like on the PVS side, but then on the MCS side, there's opportunity to do some PowerShell scripting, especially depending on your hypervisor. But then so many people, it's just like, go to this machine catalog, update, point to snapshot, point to snapshot. Go to this catalog, update, point to snapshot. And I'm wondering how much have you all been able to automate, and if maybe some of that secret sauce ever comes out into eventually the product space to help make it that way, because you all are living it every day, updating things and doing things. And that's more operational features instead of shiny things that a lot of people gravitate to.
Well, because most of our environment's PVS, we just drop the vdisk in after we do the initial Zen desktop setup wizard. Yep. So it's not much to update an image. Those MCS environments we do point and click, but are continuously developing the automation strategy behind it, so we don't, and potentially providing RFEs back to product to build that in, because I think that's an extreme benefit for our customers.
Totally. Awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, I totally agree on that. And then on the image management side of things, how are you guys handling? So you talked about, so there's a question here that asks about kind of like with the, with application layering, right? You basically have, kind of a layered image, or you have the dynamic app approach, right? So which approach are you guys taking? Are you sprinkling a little bit of both, or are you just doing kind of the published image aspect of app layering?
Right now we have a layered image, and we're actually attaching user layers for persistency as well. So we'll layer them based on if they need to be directly in the image, or if we want to assign certain applications to users based on the business needs. And that approach has worked pretty well for us. right now. It gives them everything they need. Plus, we have the option to remove access quite quickly with the elastic layers across the globe with the 80 security group control. So.
Yeah, just some real simple examples, right? Like tech support might have PuTTY or something assigned to them as elastic layers, where obviously HR, finance don't need anything along that line. So elastically, yes, we have some personas like tech support, IT, things like that are getting elastic layers assigned to them. But then again, you have the static layers, Office, things like that are compounded into the image.
So kind of following on to the persona side of things, we talked like a little bit about image management. We talked some high level architecture stuff and kind of drilling into that persona. Obviously, you guys deal with multiple departments all over the world. Everyone has a different persona. Are you guys using from I guess let's kind of unpack that a little bit. Are you guys using a lot of group policies? Are you using workspace environment manager, Citrix user profile manager, FS Logic? Like, what does your kind of story look like there?
Yeah, I was wondering that one.
So yeah, we back to Josh's point, we use every Citrix product. Literally,
you guys lean more towards, I guess, like group policies. When are you doing the security side of stuff?
I'd say both.
We're using both pretty heavily, especially with WIM's new features of being able to take in user policy or machine policies.
Machine policies, yeah.
So we're actually using WIM pretty heavily.
Nice.
We haven't gotten into some of the more in-depth features of like application throttling and things like that. We're trying to move into that a little bit more. But from a registry key perspective, things like that, we're using both.
Yeah. And they built in security features too, such as like app locker features and everything like that we've started leveraging as well. So that's pretty cool. New features that are coming into WIM.
Yep. Okay.
Oh, I was thinking one. What about the Citrix ADC world? I mean, I see a Citrix NetScaler shirt there, Chris.
Yeah, what's the access layer? Yeah.
Are y'all? What's that access layer and load balancing? You're load balancing, TFTP and storefront like the rest of us, plus the Ldap VIP here or there.
Storefront, workspace service. Yeah. What's that all kind of look like?
We use both. Most of our deployments go through gateway service because we are a cloud company and security company. And we like to leverage things like the rendezvous protocol for HDX connections, which speed up ICA traffic as well as provide a better user experience. But we do have a small footprint for storefront as well. Looking probably to move away from that. I know Josh is like, get it out of here now. But we're still going through that transition, and it takes a while to get there because there are edge cases that you just don't know about. I'll use, and I don't know if I can talk about this, but the China example, Josh, that we needed to keep it around for a little bit. So we have both, we use both, and we just give everybody what they need to do their job. First and foremost, it's about the business first.
Yeah, so do y'all have printing problems, right? Citrix printing problems? No.
Who prints anymore? Do you guys still print?
Okay.
Is paper still a thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, and to Phil's question, I don't know that we ever shoehorn ourselves into one thing. We try to stay a true customer, right? And I don't know that any customer is ever going to go straight one product or the other. You're always going to use group policies. One of the things we're looking at right now is security's locked down group policy fairly heavily, so we can't go in and make changes anymore, right? And WIM, it has the new group policy feature in it that allows you to go in and do group policy settings on it. So to kind of do some things in there as Citrix admins, we're trying to start using that a little bit more to do group policy changes.
Yeah, and I think a lot of large enterprises are the exact same way, where the Citrix team is just getting drug along with whatever group policy standards there are for computer and user settings. And WIM may be the only way you can inject the things that you need to make sure you've got list of DDCs and stuff like that configured so that when the image plops in Fort Lauderdale, it goes to those delivery controllers or cloud connectors, and then it goes to California, it goes there, or Google and goes there, whichever,
Yep. So I guess let's take a second because we only have a few minutes. I mean, time flies when you're having fun, man. It's a good conversation, and this could be like a longer. Like I could see this as a much longer conversation. Like maybe we can even, I don't know. I guess we talk to the CGC folks if y'all are up for maybe a webinar or something. I think would be a lot of fun. Anyways, yeah. So micro apps. Let's talk a little bit about that. I know, Chris, you said you kind of stepped into that area, just being kind of a natural developer and background there. How are you guys? What is a micro app? Just in your eyes, and then how are you using it internally at Citrix? What are some real world use cases that you guys are using it for? Not just something Citrix to say, hey, do this and test it. Like, what are some of the real cases?
So, like I said before, it's a pretty cool infrastructure and platform that's part of Workspace. It's basically to make people's jobs easier and lives easier and save time while you're doing your day-to-day operations. What it does is you create integrations, and those integrations connect to systems of record. In the system of record, then you can basically configure the micro apps to have actions or notifications that users subscribe to push them out to an actions in a consolidated format. One of the big things about micro apps that makes it even cooler is if your system of record doesn't have a mobile presence.
Yeah, that's a great
micro app platform is available on mobile, so it just automatically becomes part of that mobile platform.
So does that mean people are like doing like, because I mean, obviously like Synergy and stuff like that is talking about like expense reports and vacation requests.
Right.
Is Citrix using micro apps from their point of view to do at least those two things?
So internally, we've derived a lot of use case internally. And like Josh said, we drink our own champagne, right? So we've leveraged some of the APIs from some of the SORs, like Workday, for example. We have the ability to submit PTO and have managers approve PTO. There's also another use case, if you ever used Workday before, where you want to submit employee feedback, you got to go into the SOR, drill down, try to figure out where it is, because you don't do that action all the time, right? And so having a micro app tied to that action, it kind of puts it right there where you don't have to dig through the SOR, you don't have to log into Workday and then figure out where it is in the application. It's right there. It's right in front of me. And it makes the action very easy to do.
Well, yeah, because you think about like apps, like to that point, is like when you've got a really complicated app that has such a deep workflow to get to,
right?
And that people need to use and want to use, and you make it so simple by making it a micro app and putting that front door right when they walk into the building every single day. It's like, okay, now I can do this easy, and I'm not wasting X minutes, which is where a lot of the money and savings and cost is justified, right?
And some of the other use cases that we have that have been useful to our fellow Citrites, we have some Salesforce use cases because we know how complicated that system can be, especially with configuration. And we use larger SORs like Salesforce Concur for expenses. And we also have some homegrown stuff that we create to give exposure to some micro apps that people may not know exist. So we have an inventory micro app that uses Podio as a back end. We do leverage Podio.
Shout out to Podio. It's still there.
That's right.
Don't forget about the Secret Santa micro app, Chris.
That's right. So if you want to just whip something up real quick and you don't want to create an API with the whole backend and database, you can use Podio, which is highly configurable and automatically exposes an API to the micro apps platform that you can leverage. So we have used that also when there's no SOR in the background. If I just want to create some micro app, some utility micro app that I find useful.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a lot of opportunity because y'all are living it, and if y'all are ever able to share some of that, like some of those little details of some of the micro apps, I mean, obviously no API tokens or anything like that, but the basic concepts, I think that would spark a lot of people that are like, oh, we have Workday, we have Salesforce, they're using it for this. Oh, we would just change it. We only need to edit this column or this row.
Correct.
But yeah, I mean, this is super cool. I can see this being like a 2-hour super session because especially as I'm sitting here still watching the questions come in and people thinking about it. I mean, and thank y'all so much for answering as we're going too, because there's so much cool stuff coming along and y'all are doing awesome things. So.
Yeah, 100%, and actually a good question just came in from Phil. And I think it really drives to the adoption of why maybe micro apps isn't as adopted as much as you might think, right? And I think it really has to do with like Citrix traditionally was a CVAD service application desktop delivery company, right? And now they're expanding into this kind of productivity, this intelligent workspace place, but that's a different side of the business unit, right? That's dealing with employee efficiency, that's business process, that's RPA, that robotic process automation, that side of the business, right? That side of the house, business ops, right? So for you guys, kind of the question that came in around that, right, was are you guys building the integrations for the micro apps? What was the question? Yeah. So are you guys as IT building it, or are other folks in the business building those micro apps? What is that kind of requirement from a technical perspective?
So it's kind of a mixed bag, right? So we provide templates for some of the bigger SORs like Workday, Salesforce to get you started with the micro app development. So we provide some out-of-the-box use cases that you could leverage and then modify to fit your needs, right? A lot of the development is really wiring up integration and creating data endpoints to your SOR, just assuming that the API is available to do the actions that you need. And then just really dragging forms, dragging components on forms and subscribing via AD or user provider groups. So it's pretty straightforward to do the micro app development. One of the challenges that we actually do have is some use cases, right? Deriving valuable use cases. What we do for that is we leverage crowdsourcing. So, I mean, I don't work in HR. I don't work in some of the other departments around Citrix. So I don't really know what use cases would benefit them the most. So we do have a micro app where the community submits ideas, and then they vote on the ideas to kind of prioritize what would work best for them as far as micro apps and where we could add value there. So crowdsourcing is a huge part of developing some valuable micro apps for different departments.
Yeah, so go ahead.
So Chris, I just want to tell you a little story because I don't think I've ever shared this with you, but I am not a micro app developer, but I actually was tasked last year with working on a remote PC automated solution. And I got together with a couple guys and we actually built a micro app that allowed a user to self-service the request of onboarding their physical device to remote PC. And this is when the pandemic all, was fresh and new and everybody was scrambling, had to work from home and whatnot. So we built a micro app and it didn't make it to production, but it got in front of the right people and it got some vision. And it just goes to show you that if you know a little bit of PowerShell, a little bit about database or something along those lines, you can actually, take a moment, take a step back, work with a team or yourself and actually build a micro app and its integration rather easily. The page layout is there. The integration points are there, and with a little bit of knowledge, it's not as difficult as it may seem.
Yeah, and the great part about it is when community members like yourself that know more about your business line than we do, you can create micro apps that are focused and tailored toward the audience you're looking for.
I think you hit the nail on the head with crowdsourcing. This is big in community. I hope to see that these, even like that exact use case that you just mentioned, would be great to see that out in like a store, right? Or some sort of central place. You guys have kind of in the micro apps, you kind of have the public apps that are available. So hopefully those things start to make it there, right? Those are awesome use cases to have as part of that. And one of them I think was built by can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he's a Citrix developer had built, and which is where you can kind of see your user sessions and log on and log off idle sessions and things like that. A little bit of self-service functionality. That's a pretty awesome feature and something that really everyone would benefit from.
Yeah,
so
and as the platform advances from where it started, I mean, it kind of gives you the ability to kind of not be a developer and be able to create a micro app that's useful, or allows you to do some sort of scripting with JavaScript and other languages to be able to do more advanced applications if you need to, without using any kind of middleware. So the product has come a long way, and it's pretty cool. It's a pretty interesting product.
I think one of the keys I just want to throw out too is that micro apps can be as little or as complex as you want and need them to as well. One of the cooler micro apps that we got, because we're dealing with COVID like everybody else, so they had to set up separation inside of offices. We've got a micro app that when you come into a Citrix office, you can pull it up. It'll show you a blueprint of the floor and show you which desks are available, keeping social distancing and everything. Yeah. And then you go ahead and reserve a desk and take it. Then we might have a super simple one, which will say, might be a polling type app that simply asks, was this thing that you just did good or bad? And you just thumbs up and thumbs down and hit send. So it can be super simple. It can be complex. It's really what you want it to do.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, guys, I know I think we're at the mark here. I could talk all day with you all. I mean, I think it's a good conversation. I think we have great interaction with the chat. So I think we'll definitely need a part 2. And maybe what we can do ahead of time, we'll submit some questions. Like, why don't we open if we're talking about that webinar potentially? If are you guys up for doing something like that?
Yeah,
I just kind of committed you without asking.
Shane, I mean, I think this whole thing started with when I moved to South Florida, right? And I started joining the South Florida group, and you're the moderator of that one. And then COVID happened, and my boss man there let me move back up to where I'm from, which, funny enough, Cobble's just right down the street from me here.
Nice.
Cobble used to be my sales engineer when he worked for Citrix.
Yep.
So
that's awesome.
I go to the Louisville and I mean, he's here talking to me, right? So I actually attend the Louisville and Nashville user group. I think Josh is pushing some of our team to continue attending the South Florida one. So our team attends several of the local user groups. But yeah.
No, that's awesome. Yeah. So I think, Stephanie, you did hear webinar, team's up for it. So maybe we can put something out there, submit some questions ahead of time, and we can kind of run through those and do a little bit of open discussion too. I think would be awesome. So yeah. So I think that's it. Real quick, and on the count of three, say your favorite Citrix product. Ready? 1, 2, 3, go. No, we'll never know. Cool, man.
All right. The next one.
Cool. Well, guys, thank you very much. Take care. Awesome conversation. Sweet. Shake and bake.
About to drop any second now, so get your robot pose ready. Don't know what's going to happen. We're going to freeze in a second, and then it's going to go to control up.
We might have to speak over that video too. I don't know.
A user has an issue. ControlUp can get a screenshot of the user session to give you visibility. This user is having issues, and I'd like to troubleshoot in their session using their rights. We can start a command prompt to troubleshoot further. Security restrictions prevent us from starting the command prompt. Instead of messing with group policy objects, we can remove the session's group policy settings, and now we can start a command prompt to continue troubleshooting. The prompt is now available to walk the user through some troubleshooting steps. Once complete, we can reapply group policy with ControlUp. We have a Citrix user who put in a ticket having poor user experience. There are multiple sessions. We can start a chat with specific sessions to ensure this is the correct one. The high-level session metrics look good. Let's drill into the session and see the session processes. Sorting by CPU, we don't see anything on the Citrix side that it's causing experience degradation. Most troubleshooting tools would stop here, but not ControlUp. The end user is on an iGel device being monitored by ControlUp. ControlUp has full visibility into iGel devices. We'll tell ControlUp to navigate to the device in the console. Immediately, we can see the iGel device has high CPU utilization. However, the processes view and ControlUp highlight the root cause. WebKit web process is consuming significant resources. This process started after a recent change to turn on browser content redirection. Knowing the root cause, the admins can now work on fixing this problem. ControlUp is an excellent tool for managing your infrastructure. For example, if you select a group of infrastructure machines, you can live audit and baseline your Windows Update patches. By selecting Manage Programs and Updates and expanding Updates, then expanding Microsoft Windows, ControlUp shows you all the patches applied and any differences between the machines in a color-coded display. Metadata on the compared machines is available by clicking on a patch. To save the report on your current patch state, click Export in the upper left. ControlUp's controller engine makes it a snap to see inconsistencies in your infrastructure. But ControlUp doesn't stop there. By expanding the ControlUp console with script actions, we can list all available or approved Windows updates. In addition, the script action can also apply updates. ControlUp's grouping engine takes the output of the available Windows updates and shows you which machines require different patches. By clicking Export on the ControlUp script actions result window, you can now have a complete report of patches applied and patches available. Access Solve from within ControlUp by clicking on the Solve tab and then clicking on the Solve button. This will launch ControlUp Solve, a web-based version of the ControlUp real-time console. The landing page is a high-level dashboard view, perfect for any administrator, help desk, or NOC. There are 3 dashboards available. One showing user experience metrics, one showing resource consumption, and one showing all combined metrics. Switching to Discovery View, and we have drilled into our environment for the first time. The Discovery View has a new dynamic topology bar showing your environment as clickable logical resources. Underneath is a graph view showing the aggregate of the metrics, and lastly, underneath is the real-time grid view. The classic ControlUp tree is available by clicking the Open Tree button. Just like the console today, you can click on a folder to focus the main display on those objects. Columns have been given new capabilities. Filters can be applied on a per-column basis. Here, we'll show only machines with more than 50% memory utilization. There's also a search box with free text queries. The display of the grid can be customized. The grid can be expanded to show more items by hiding the aggregate graphs. Expand it further to grid-only view, maximizing viewing of the number of simultaneous objects. Columns can be added, removed, rearranged, and the grid density can be selected between default, comfortable, and compact. Now, the real-time view is great, but what if you want to glance at what happened yesterday? Within Solve, we tie into ControlUp Insights, and we can pull recent historical data. Recent historical data goes back up to 3 days. Metrics with an expand option will show you some additional metrics for a quick historical glance. In this view, historical data can be shown for up to 1 month ago. Try ControlUp for free at www.controlup.com.
All right, sweet. So now it's on to the EG Innovations as our next thing.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, wait. Game time.
And music was relaxed.
Good afternoon. My name's John Worthington. I'm the Director of Customer Success at EG Innovations, and I appreciate you giving me a few minutes to tell you about our company. From the early days of physical machines to virtualized infrastructures, public cloud services, and today's modern digital services, EG Innovations has been helping customers answer the question, why is my application slow? With the digital experience being key to a competitive edge, the digital workspace, whether that's located on your premises in a public cloud such as Azure or AWS, or whether it's a hybrid like Citrix Cloud, customers need a 360-degree view of user experience, and that's what EG Innovations provides. But since Citrix users voted this video a winner in the recent Citrix Ready Spotlight contest, I'm going to let that do the talking and then provide a few concluding remarks.
Citrix is redesigning the way how the future works. With Citrix Digital Workspace, we believe work is no longer a place. It's an increasingly dynamic activity. That's why the digital workspaces from Citrix are adaptable, offering employees freedom and security. Whether work happens on site, on the road, or in the cloud, Citrix gives you confidence without compromise. However, sometimes things go wrong. When a user complains of sluggish performance, it becomes challenging for a Citrix administrator to identify the source of the problem. EG Enterprise is a purpose-built monitoring and analytics solution for Citrix environments that allows administration teams to proactively monitor and troubleshoot performance issues instantly, even before users notice, thereby ensuring a superior digital workspace experience. Let's look at the 4 key areas where EG Enterprise helps Citrix customers. The performance of a Citrix digital workspace is determined by the experience it delivers to users. EG Enterprise measures all aspects of Citrix user experience. Log on and desktop launch times are measured by synthetic simulation. In addition, EG Enterprise monitors the real user experience by tracking every single Citrix session, providing several insights. When user experience is poor, what is causing this is the next question. To answer this, end-to-end visibility is essential. EG Enterprise has built-in expertise to monitor the performance of every Citrix workspace tier, and EG Enterprise monitors all the IT infrastructure services supporting Citrix. You can collect thousands of metrics, but where is the root cause? To determine this, EG Enterprise auto-constructs a service topology map, highlighting the dependencies between the different Citrix tiers and the supporting infrastructure. Performance metrics across all tiers are auto-correlated in real time, and the root cause of the problem is highlighted clearly. The value of a monitoring tool goes beyond problem diagnosis and troubleshooting. Trends of metrics collected can be analyzed across tiers, and insights obtained for optimizing and right-sizing your infrastructure so you can accommodate more users. If you want to make your daily routine more productive, you must move from reactive to proactive monitoring. EG Enterprise is a Citrix-ready verified solution that can help you achieve your Citrix user experience and ROI goals.
Now, besides thanking all of you who voted for our video, I'd like to make a few final comments. The deep domain expertise EG Enterprise has in all components in the Citrix stack, including Citrix Cloud, may be one reason why Citrix has selected EG Enterprise as the exclusive performance monitor for their major trade shows, and more recently for their global demonstration center. But the mission-critical nature of the digital workspace and our ability to provide total performance visibility into both Citrix and non-Citrix tiers of the digital workspace are also important drivers. A Forrester study found that almost all user experience problems relied on several parts of the IT infrastructure. We've independently verified that customers get rapid ROI on their investment in EG Enterprise, as well as significant improvements in their ability to proactively isolate performance issues. Customers can no longer afford to treat the digital workspace as just another technical silo. There's just too many moving parts to today's digital workspaces. The total performance visibility that EG Enterprise provides can enable a new kind of IT hero, someone that embraces transparency and moves your organization to proactive performance management. If you'd like to hear more, stop by our booth and enter our drawing for a Bose wireless earbud giveaway, and we'll give you a gift certificate as our way of saying thank you.
Woohoo! Are we
Sweet, man. That was good. Yeah, thank you for EG for providing that, and ControlUp. Both great companies, great videos there. So up next is a man that needs no introduction.
Nah, it's just this guy named Dan. Oh, there
Dan,
he is.
the man, the myth, the legend. Welcome, man.
Hey,
Great background too. Look at that. Those your photos back there?
Yeah, some of them.
Sweet, man.
We'll see a few more. You guys gave away all my slide ideas.
Well, I mean, all I'm trying to figure out is like, will there ever be, and maybe I'm already guessing ahead, but is there going to be like Chuck Norris on like some nebula or something?
Wow.
Right? I don't know. That's like maybe the fourth wall kind of thing. I don't know.
That's cool, man. Well, listen, Dan, thank you for coming as always, man. You're a huge supporter of the CUGC, so thank you. You got Dan Feller just rocking and rolling here on Zero Trust Strategy and M&A, merger and acquisition. So yeah, man, just take it away and rock and roll, man.
Right.
And bake.
Let's see if I can figure out how to be smart and share my screen. All right.
Keep going.
Yeah, I got to make sure I pick the right screen. And I assume that everyone can see it now. All right. So, yeah, ZTNA, mergers and acquisitions, that's kind of a boring title. So really, I'd prefer to do something like, sorry, I just lost my slide. There we go. How N factor makes me look really smart. Because a lot of what we can do on this for M&A is really around N factor and doing authentication policies. But like, was said earlier today that I might share some Chuck Norris things, I might share some astrophotography things. So I thought I'd give you an update on some of the stuff I've been doing. It's been a while since I've actually presented at CUGC. I got a little busy last year and this year, but I was actually able to fit this in, which was great. And so over the past year, I kind of improved a little bit on my astrophotography. So of course, we all know what that is. That's the moon. But it's actually cool actually trying to pull out some different minor colors through the different filters. Another thing is I've been doing more on the galaxy. So that's the cigar galaxy. Apparently it looks like a cigar. Maybe a cigar that's exploding in the center. I don't know. I don't smoke, so I'm not exactly sure how that works. The other one is the sunflower galaxy. Again, I don't know if you can see a sunflower in that or not, but that's probably the best galaxy picture I took. I do like, though, when some of the images I take, they actually resemble the name. So that's Thor's helmet. That's a nebula. And then this one is the biggest image I've ever taken. This is the Heart Nebula. This is actually 15 different panels all stitched together into a single image. So it's basically 3 images down and 5 images across to actually capture this entire thing. And The nebula actually goes quite a bit further down to the bottom right and quite a bit further up to the upper right as well. But after 15 frames, that was enough. And each frame is taking, I think this one, each frame was about 3 hours of images through the telescope. So 3 times 15 is quite a bit of time. So this is the center of it. So if you look at here, you can see there's a lot of detail in the center. So I actually went and did through multiple filters and zoomed it in a lot more to get all the color and the detail from the center of the Heart Nebula. Now recently, this is my latest one. So for those of you who've followed some of the images that the Hubble Space Telescope has done, over the years, this is what was known as the pillars of creation. So this is, all these little pillars are just star-forming regions. So I was able to take a similar object or a similar photo. My equipment's not, over $1 billion like NASA is, but I'm pretty proud of how this turned out. And then I've also figured out how to remove stars from the images as well, just to actually see some more of the interesting details. And now the last one I'll show you, because this is the final one. I just finished this past week. This is the Pelican Nebula. This was actually about 30 hours of imaging through the telescope, so over 8 different nights. And I always get asked, how do you do this? What type of equipment do you need to be able to image something like this? So that's the telescope I use. You can see all the different little doodads and electronic stuff that I've acquired over the years to actually be able to do this. And I can tell you my first round of images were nothing like what you see now. I mean, they were pretty bad. But over the years, I've been doing this for about a decade now, and I'm finally at the point where it's I think I'll show people some of these images because they're finally getting to that point. It's they're starting to look pretty cool. But like I said, this is not all about astrophotography. This is about M&A, mergers and acquisitions, and how to do this. So what I want to do is I want to basically draw out of what we're trying to build here. So if you think about M&A, what's happening is that you're going to have 2 different companies, and one company is acquiring a different company. So company A and company B. And we can't assume that they're all going to be on Active Directory. So in this example, we're going to have one company on Active Directory, the other one on Okta. So imagine now you have 2 different users, user A and then user B. And what we're going to do is to provide access to resources via Workspace. So we're going to use Workspace to allow users from these 2 different companies to get access to resources from each other. Since they're all, since it's acquired now, it's really the same company, but all the IT is still separated. So we don't want to have to force company B users start using Active Directory. So we're going to use the ADC to handle this N factor policy to allow us to authenticate to AD if you're user A and Okta if you're from company B. Now, once you're authenticated, we can then use Workspace that will authorize you access to VDI, to private web apps, and to whatever else. I should apologize for my handwriting here. I'm not the best drawer on these things, but you'll get the idea. The next part is the N factor. And so this is what we're going to build. So the first thing we're going to do is an org selection. And then from there, based on which organization you pick, we pick a different authentication policy. So Ldap, if you're from company A, is going to authenticate you to Active Directory. Now, if you pick company B in the org selection, what we're going to do is we want to authenticate you to Okta, but in order to do that, the ADC is going to use a Saml policy. And that Saml authentication policy is then going to point to Okta, and Okta is going to do the authentication for us. Now, the last part of this that we have to do is, because we're going to authorize this user to company A resources, we need to do an Ldap lookup for or from the company A's Active Directory domain. So what we're going to do here is we're basically federating identities here. So if you're a company B user, your identity is in Okta. And we're going to use a common parameter, basically UPN, that's going to link that Okta account to company A's Active Directory account. Because in order for us to authorize access to a company A resource, it has to be based on the company A's identity provider, which is Active Directory. So we're gonna create basically shadow accounts inside of Active Directory using the same UPN name that this user has for Okta, and that allows us to do the federation. Now, personally, when I started monkeying around with identity, I didn't really know what I was doing, and honestly, when people said federate, I didn't actually understand what that meant. And you hear it a lot when you talk about single sign-on and identity providers and things like that. I always talk about federation. So you can actually think about this as like Star Trek. So for those of you, I mean, this is a geeky type conference, so I would guess the majority of people actually know what this is and what Star Trek is. So think of the Federation. Basically, the Federation is a group of planets where they trust each other. That's what Identity Federation is. You have different entities, Okta and Active Directory, that there's this trust between them. So Active Directory is going to trust Okta to authenticate the user, and Okta is basically going to say, this UPN name I have authenticated, so you don't have to. I've already done it for you. So this person's trusted. So Active Directory doesn't need to authenticate the user anymore. It's trusting Okta to do it for any company B user. So this is how we're going to do the whole identity portion of the whole mergers and acquisitions thing. And to do that, we're gonna work with ADC and Nfactor. Before we get to that, though, we'll share something else. So, over the past year, we're all supposed to socially distance. So I actually found a new hobby where I could basically stay far away from everybody. So I started mountain biking, and I did this in the wintertime. So of course I got a fat tire bike, and I just happened to be lucky that I bought the fat tire bike in October of 2019, because by the time you got to spring of 2020, bikes were hard to come by because everybody was buying bikes because they needed activities and because they couldn't travel anywhere. So I got lucky enough that I just happened to buy a bike before the pandemic hit. So, in the wintertime, I would mountain bike in the snow. I would do the same thing in the springtime. I do the same thing in the summertime. And I do the same thing in the fall. And yes, that is the exact same spot for all 4 seasons that I was able to take the picture at. So you can kind of see the changing of the seasons throughout there. But I did quite a bit of that. I think last year I rode 800 miles. And this year so far, I'm at 1,000 miles. And I still have a few months left. And biking doesn't stop when winter arrives. That actually becomes much more fun. All right, so let's get into the ADC. So I am not a networking expert, but I was able to figure this out. So we're going to build an Nfactor flow like I diagrammed out before. So in order to do this, we go in this Nfactor visualizer, which is a heck of a lot easier than trying to do this on your own. At least for me it is. And I'm just giving this thing a name. So M&A Nfactor. So the first part, based on our diagram, was we wanted to create a decision, a drop down. Are you company A or company B? So I'm going to go ahead and give this a name. This is what the schema is going to be. The schema is what is going to be shown here. So you can see the examples in this list, and somewhere in here, there's one for like domain drop down. And once I find it, I'm going to go ahead and customize this because I'm not doing a domain. What I want to do is I want to change this schema to be based on the company. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a name because I'm building a new schema here for my on-prem ADC. I'm pretty much going to leave a lot of the details as is, except I'm just going to change the word domain to company. And farther down, do the same. And then instead of domain names, I'm going to do company A, company B, and company C. I would put, like Simpsons stuff here, but then I'd get in trouble for copyright infringement. So we just go generic company A, B, and C. All right, so I now have the schema built. And, all right. Sometimes the ADC does kind of weird things on me because I have built these things before and I might not have completely deleted stuff. So I now have the schema. Now the policy is, in this instance, there is no policy. the policy is really going to be something like I'd be using the policy to authenticate against something, but all that I'm doing is a dropdown. So there's no authentication policy that's happening here. All I want to do is show a dropdown, and that's what we're going to see here. This is what the user experience will now be. When I access Workspace, I've already configured Workspace to point to my ADC, and we can now see I have a dropdown of what I just built. Now, what's really cool is if you go into developer tools within your browser and you go in the network area, I can go in here and I'm going to select company A and hit login. Now, what you see is a doauthentication.do file, and you can see the details. I pick company A. And so it says domain equals company A. So I'm going to use this as part of my decision tree coming up next, because the users pick the company they belong to. So now we need a decision tree to pick if this user picked company A, do this. If the user picked company B, do that. So what we're going to do is create a new policy here as part of the first part of this decision tree is going to be company A. And it's not authenticating. All we're going to do is looking at the response that the user gave back to us and seeing if the string equals something. So we're going to type this expression in, the HTTP, the response within the body. What we want to be able to do is look after a certain string for some type of text. So that string is always going to be domain equals. And we saw that when we went into developer tools. So we saw domain equals, in this instance, it was company A. So if after the string domain equals contains company A, this is the path through my authentication flow I want to go through. I'm actually going to go back in and copy this because the expression for the other one's pretty much the same, except I'm going to change it company A to company B. And so we're going to create another authentication policy, because this time it's going to be for company B's, decision. And there's no authentication, it's just an expression. So we change this to B. And at this point, we can now continue through our N factor flow. And think of it like, as a flow chart, if, then, and decision trees and all that. So at the top part of this is company A. So the next factor in this is I need to authenticate this user to Active Directory, because company A is using Active Directory. So the schema for this is, because I'm going to keep this simple, I'm just going to use a username and password. You could do tokens, multi-factor authentication. You could do push, TOTP, doesn't matter. There's lots of different ways you can do this, but to keep it simple, I'm just going to do single factor. And again, there's policies or there's templates in here for the schemas. There's one in here for single factor authentication. And so I pick that, hit select. I now built my schema, or selected my schema. Now, the policy here is I need to authenticate against my Active Directory. So I'm going to build a brand new authentication policy. I'm going to change the action to be Ldap. And then I'm going to create a new one, because I'm going to point to my Active Directory domain controller. So for this, I go ahead and give it a name, and then I'm going to enter in all this information, the server name. I'm going to go with IP address. I'm going to change the security so it's SSL instead of just plain text. And then server type, Active Directory. I'm not sure who uses NDS anymore. And then I got to enter in the base DN. So this is where it should start looking for my users who are logging in. So I'm looking at my entire domain. And then the administrator DN is what account is the ADC going to use to do the connection to Active Directory. And so I'm using my admin account. I gave it the password. I wanted to use a UPN name instead of the SAM name. And I wanted to bring back group memberships as part of this whole thing. So I've now created that whole policy for Active Directory. Now, what we can do is flip back to our user. And what we should see now is when we connect to Workspace, it sends to our on-prem ADC. I get the decision of company A or company B. And if I pick company A, I should get an Active Directory authentication schema. And so I can go ahead and enter my credentials, and I should log into Workspace. And let's try it again. Company A, not Company 1. So go ahead and log in, and pretty easy. It's just Active Directory. I'm now in Workspace. Pretty straightforward. Now the next part of this becomes a little different because we're going to go to Okta. So again, we're going to create another factor here, and this comes off the bottom portion of that decision tree because this is for Company B. So for this one, it's going to be Okta. So this time there is no schema. We don't want to show the user anything because Okta is going to show them something. What we want to do is create a policy using Saml. So we'll go ahead and create a brand new policy with Saml, and the action we're going to go ahead and add new. To do this, we now need to flip over to Okta as an administrator, and we basically are going to build a new Citrix gateway application in here that's going to allow our on-prem ADC to contact and work with Okta. So go through here, the applications on Okta. We're going to browse the catalog. We'll find, do a search on Citrix Gateway, and we'll go ahead and install this to our Okta environment. And we need the login URL for our workspace environment. So I already have this. This is that was the public URL for my on-prem ADC that I pasted in there. And then the last part here is just enabling Saml. So if I hit the identity provider metadata, this is what Okta is providing me. This is what I need to tell my ADC to use to contact with Okta securely. So I can just copy that URL in there, and my on-prem ADC basically configures itself for Okta. So it's really easy to do when you get that URL for this. So the last part of this is, you could just hit true here for expression, and I decide to put, the HTTP request is valid. Makes me look more smart. Now, the last part of this is, so policy sends us to Okta, it's Saml. Okta authenticates us, and Okta will send back a Saml assertion that will contain information about my account in Okta, which will include my UPN name. I now need to use that UPN name to do an Active Directory lookup from Company A's Active Directory domain, because resources are based on Active Directory, on Company A's Active Directory. So again, I'm going to go ahead and create a new authentication policy, and I can't use the one I did before. You might be wondering, why can't you use the AD policy you did before? Because there's one item that's different. When we did it before for Company A, we were using this policy to authenticate the user to Active Directory. This time, we're going to use Active Directory to just do a user lookup. We're not authenticating because Okta already authenticated us. And because of this trust we have with Okta in our AD domain, AD is trusting that this user has been authenticated. So in order just to do a lookup, we just deselect authentication. And everything else in this policy is going to be the same. The base DN, just where to search for the users, the admin account, and the group membership. So when you do this, it's kind of like, wait, what's happening here? And when you actually start thinking about it, it makes sense. Is when you get into Workspace, all those resources that we're going to show are going to be based on, they're all Company A resources. And Company A resources are based on Active Directory, Company A's Active Directory domain for authorization. So here we are basically federating an Okta ID to Company A's Active Directory account. So what you'll see this time on the user demo is we go ahead and log in. This time we'll hit Company B. And what you'll see here is Workspace is actually going to send us now over to Okta. So we are now on an Okta webpage. And we'll log in with our Okta Company B user account. And if that's successful, Okta sends back a SAML assertion back to Gateway or on-prem ADC, which then sends that back to Workspace. So now I've successfully logged into Workspace with that account. Now, what I want to kind of show is a little bit of difference here. Is so this is something I think that's in Tech Preview now. So one of the challenges you have in M&A is, there's always that, well, I'm from, you got it now with Citrix. Well, I'm from Citrix and I'm from Reich, and both using Workspace. So let's create a policy-based theme based on the company you belong to. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this theme. If your company A, you get one theme, company B, you'll get a different theme. So the first thing I want to do is change the Citrix Workspace logo and use my artistic skills here and change this to something much better. So change that to company A. Change it to some of my favorite colors instead of the blues and weird greens. I'm going to move over some hot pink colors. I think it looks much better. And so go ahead and change all these things. And so now we've created a brand new theme, and that's what it will look like. The next part of this is we got to give it a name and assign it to which users will get this theme. So we're going to use our Active Directory domain, and we're going to use a group membership. So I have a group called Company A Users. And so if you're a member of this group, this is the theme you're going to get when you log into Workspace. So we're going to do the same thing, except this time it's going to be for Company B. So remember, all the Okta users who would be federated in Active Directory, they have an Active Directory account. The user doesn't know what it is. The user doesn't know the password, but they have an Active Directory account. And they're a member of the group Company B users. So what we'll do is we'll create a brand new theme, and we'll assign this to Company A's Active Directory for the group Company B users. I know it gets kind of confusing with Company A and Company B, but hopefully it's making sense. These type of sessions are usually easier to do in person because you can always see if people have blank stares in their faces. So we'll see what happens. All right, so we'll log back in and we'll see what the UI will now look like, A or B. So we log in with B, and what we end up seeing when the user logs in, Workspace should now be like a green color. I think that's what I picked for B. And green headers. Yep. All right. And this time, I didn't do it last time. I'll look at the applications that I've assigned to this user as well. So Company B users, this one had 5 apps published to them. So launch another browser. And this time we'll go back through this whole process of Company A. And again, it'll be Active Directory. We'll log in. And I believe when the login happens, the color for this one is the pink colors. And users logging in. And all right, our headers are now pink. You have the logo of Company A. And we take a look at all the applications we have out here. You'll see the list is much greater than what we had for Company B. I mean, that's just all, membership, group membership assignments. All right, so that is the ADC portion of this. The next part is we'll go into Federated Authentication Service real quick. But before that, I want to, during the pandemic, we cooked a lot of food over our outdoor fire pit. And I'm always stuck, cooking all the hot dogs for everyone. So there's like 5 of them. And so I always wanted to drink a nice cold beverage while I'm doing this, which is a pain. So I got a little smart about it and decided there's a way to do this with no hands. And it actually works really well. But that was like my brilliant idea of 2020. All right, so the next thing is Federated Authentication Service. So we've logged in as these users. So this is a Company B user who logged in with Okta, and they got access to their applications. So the problem we now have is that there's no single sign-on to VDI desktops because we haven't logged into Active Directory. We haven't logged into Okta, and the passwords aren't the same. And so it doesn't have my password to actually pass this through to my VDI desktop. And so we're going to see here is when it finally loads, I'm supposed to log in. And honestly, that user experience kind of sucks. So what we want to do is we want to use the Federated Authentication Service to fix this. And I have some of this stuff installed already because you don't really want to watch all of this. It gets kind of boring seeing install, and next. But what you'll see here is, in cloud, I can add a FAS server and go ahead and hit download and download this stuff. And I've already installed it because it's really easy. So if you used FAS before, it was much more difficult than this. So here I hit deploy. All my certificates for my AD certificate authority have been deployed. Now I'm going to set up my certificate authority. So I hit publish. Done. Now I need to authorize this service. And so I'm going to go ahead, I'll hit authorize to my Active Directory certificate authority. Now, in order to authorize this, I have to go over to my CA, which in this case is on my domain controller. And I have a pending request in here, and I just have to hit right-click that thing and say approve or issue, I guess. And then go back to my FAS server, and when it refreshes, it just say, all right, the service is authorized. And then I need to create a rule of how this is going to work. So FAS is using virtual smart cards. So you can log into Windows with a username and password or a smart card. So if you don't know, Federated Authentication Service is a virtual smart card. So you don't have to hand these things out. It's all based on these certificates that we're deploying. So to create the rules, I'm pretty much picking default stuff here. I picked the CA who's handling these things. Everything else I'm picking defaults. I'm not putting any restrictions on it. I'm saying any user on any VDA can use FAS, just because this is just a test environment. And you can limit this if you want. All right. So now I have to link this to my cloud environment. So hit connect. I sign into Citrix Cloud. I'll enter in my ID and password. And then Citrix Cloud now has the multi-factor authentication, so I'll have to add that as well. But then this will link my on-prem FAS server to my cloud account, my Citrix Cloud subscription. And so my CVAD service will be able to utilize this FAS service when it logs users onto VDI and virtual app desktops or virtual applications. All right, so that's all done. And what we should see is, all right, we'll do so we've created the rules. We just have to select the existing rule, and then we can hit finish. And all right, let's use the default rule. All right, so the last thing maybe I have to do is the rule's created. It's not available for use. All right, use an existing rule. I must have hit something. And then still not available for use. Okay, I haven't done it helps when you read. To go into Active Directory and create a GPO. So there's a GPO that basically says, these are the FAS server IP addresses that my VDA should be using, my CVAD environment should be using. So I'll go into GPMC, I'll create a new group policy object, and I'm going to I'm going to define the IP address for my FAS server. So go ahead and create one, give it a name, and then we'll go ahead and edit this, and somewhere in this long list of stuff, we'll be able to find the Citrix FAS policies. Maybe. Come back. Just thinking. All right. All right, so under authentication, there is the FAS, the Federated Authentication Service. So here's just the DNS addresses for all the different FAS servers. And I'll go ahead and I've already, I have that configured in there. And so I now need to apply this policy to the OU that contains those resources. And so those resources, see, it's already applied to my resources, but it didn't work. So that must mean that my computer might not be in the right OU. So we will look to see. And it is not. All right, so everything's in there. Now we hit refresh. Still did not work. I forgot to hit GP update. So we'll do a group policy update through command prompt. And hopefully that time this all works. If I remember everything, how to do it, this is actually really easy to set up. I just got to, read the steps and let Active Directory, synchronize and update all my GPOs, and then this stuff works. But now that this is done, next time I hit refresh, it should say it's connected to Citrix Cloud. Maybe. There we go. There's a checkbox. All right. So what we can now do, since FAS is set up, what we're able to do is, you can look, you can see in the cloud that it's all running. But if we flip back over to the user, what we end up seeing is that we'll go ahead and launch, a VDI desktop again. Last time we had to enter in credentials. This time we'll go right into login, because this time it's going to use a virtual smart card to log us in. And so it'll bypass, you won't see a login screen. And you can see even the name here, it's even showing up, b.user at company B, to see that user has been, to see which user has been logged in. And that name is actually the name within Active Directory. I just happen to choose the same one. You could put something else different in there, just as long as that parameter that's linking Okta to AD is the same. It doesn't have to be your UPN. But usually that's the easiest. All right, so that is how you basically set all this stuff up. So a couple other things I've done over the last year or so. So the old saying, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. So I have a cherry tree, and this was like in the height of, everything was ripe. So if you want to make cherry pie, you got to take all the pits out of these things, which takes a long time. I think this image, I had 120 cups of cherries off this thing, and I didn't want to pit 120 cups of cherries. So what I learned is you can actually just shove these things into a mason jar and fill it with vodka. And so the year I did this, I think the first year I did, I only made like 3 quarts, and it went quick. We drank it pretty quick, and then I made 8 quarts. And then this particular year, it's going now, and I think I made 13 quarts. And yes, it all goes away very quickly. The neighbors like it, family and friends like it, but it's something to do with lots of extra very sour cherries. All right, so if you want any of the gory details of this whole stuff I showed on M&A, there's an RA out there that we have on the Tech Zone. There's a video we have out there on the Tech Zone as well that kind of shows side by side. So there's lots of extra details in there about how all this stuff gets set up. But this session was basically like, let me walk you through the ADC portion, because that's usually what scares a lot of people. And I know when I was setting this stuff up, I'm like, I don't like doing networking stuff. I'm a desktop person, but I was able to figure it out. I wasn't able to figure out the first time, a lot of mistakes, but I did figure it out. And it was kind of fun learning it. So before I hand it back, everyone's, especially, I know Shane and Patrick, you guys are probably wondering, when's it going to happen? And we had to have one Chuck Norris back in here at least. So I couldn't end without that, but that is it. So I don't know how much time we got left. I gotta find
that right now. Yeah, so we're we're actually right on the time. So
Sweet.
so we got to actually shift it over. So yeah, it was perfect, man. Great presentation, by the way. I just love your presentations, man. You bring a little bit of kind of your hobbies into the whole thing, and then you also obviously keep it deeply technical. Everyone, if you look at all the comments, I mean, everyone just loves them. So yeah, I appreciate you taking the time. I know you put a lot of work into them, so appreciate that. And thank you for the suspense as well, all the way through the end for that Chuck Norris photo. That was stellar to line it up like that, man. So thank you again. Again, I appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing hopefully more posts. And do you have a YouTube or anything like that? Like or some kind of photo gallery, or that other people could join and see, or just post them on Twitter?
Oh, for the Astro stuff?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's chaoticnebula.com.
I cannot spell that. Yeah, throw that in there. And then just so everyone knows, at 2:55 during the roundtable, Dan will be there. You can join Dan's roundtable and do a kind of technical deep dive with him, ask him whatever questions, or just talk about space and cool stuff. So, anyways, vodka cherries, good stuff. Appreciate you, man. And up next we have Goliath. So we're going to play a video from Goliath Technologies and kind of diving into their solution and some of the value they can bring to the EUC space.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this 5 minutes of fame here today in today's session. My name is John Grant from Goliath Technologies. I'm the Director of Product Marketing here. I'm joined today in our booth and today for this session by George Spears, where we're going to have a little bit of a back and forth. George Spears is a Citrix CTP and longtime Citrix expert and has a lot of great input on our topic today. And so he came along and to answer a series of questions and give his insights into why it is that Citrix administrators have challenges resolving user experience issues, and explain some of the challenges underneath that contribute to their inability and the fact that they have their hands tied commonly to solve these kinds of issues. And then he wants to talk a little bit about how folks have solved those challenges. My first question is, why do user experience issues happen in Citrix? And two, why is it that administrators have their hands tied, in your view?
Yeah, I think user experience issues happen in Citrix environments just due to complexity, first and foremost. You have multiple teams that have to manage the Citrix infrastructure and all the supporting services from storage and network, Active Directory. These are all typically managed by different IT departments. And then you throw in cloud, Citrix Cloud or Microsoft Azure, which again adds further complexity. And all these different things, they need to work together optimally. If they don't, then obviously user experience can be impacted. And remote working has added further complexity. Obviously now Citrix is used a lot more by remote workers due to COVID, and that means that IT has lost some visibility of the networks that users are connecting in from and the IT equipment that they use, such as the personal devices that users use. So they can also impact. Essentially, the Citrix administrators' hands is somewhat tied because they have to deal with a lot of the problems that typically the help desk are unable to support due to lack of knowledge around the Citrix environments, lack of expertise.
So you're saying there's a combination between the fact that these Citrix environments, there's a ton of IT variables that drive user experience, and there's a difficulty in getting data from all of those pieces because of the various tools and native tools, monitoring point products. And then you're saying that's combined with a lack of overall expertise in Citrix in most organizations. Is that essentially what you're saying?
It is, yeah.
Okay. All right. You mentioned something about help desk and how they've been unable to resolve Citrix issues and how they typically just kind of escalate things. I'm interested in talking about that a little bit more in our sessions later on, right after this one. But in the interest of time, let's keep going. So you mentioned, okay, so there's a lot of complexity, meaning that free tools don't really give you what you need to address those kinds of issues. Well, how do you solve something like that? Why is it that you think software is the answer versus other potential, more traditional methods of solving a challenge like this?
Yeah, as you say, the traditional method could be going out and hiring a bunch of skilled Citrix experts, but that's not easy. I mentioned there is a shortage. I think software can somewhat fill the gap. It can almost act as the Citrix expert, if you like, because one, it collects data, and two, it understands the data and it's able to translate that data into a readable context for the help desk to then have more power and have more understanding on how to troubleshoot end user experience issues and get to root cause much quicker also.
And so you think the traditional methods, hiring more admins, that won't do it. So what does the right software solution look like? You mentioned, or you alluded to a couple of things. But what do you need to see in a solution to, you feel, in your mind, address this?
First and foremost, it has to be bespoke to Citrix environments, so it can't just be any monitoring software off the shelf, because it may not understand or have the ability to monitor the different user experience metrics that Citrix relies on. So it has to have the right data. It also needs to collect that historically. Typically, if an issue is escalated to the Citrix engineering team, they need to have that historical record of data to be able to find root cause. And then thirdly, it has to have embedded intelligence. So it's okay having the data, but how do you present that, and how do you make that data understandable and actually meaningful, so that the help desk and beyond can understand better how to troubleshoot these problems?
Okay, good. Well, that's our time, George. But we'll be switching over to our booth. We invite you all to join, where we'll be drilling into these concepts a little bit more, and we'll also be showing a series of other sessions and demos throughout the rest of the day. So thank you, everyone, for joining. We'll see you in a few minutes.
All right. Yeah, great conversation by George and Goliath there, kind of talking through some of the things to worry about when talking through end user experience. So up next we have, and thank you, Goliath, for the sponsorship for the group as well. So up next we have Stratodesk. So they've been around for a long time. Kind of excited to see what's updated in that respect. So they're kind of a solution out there to kind of turn your fat clients, your physical endpoints, laptops into a thin client solution. So that's kind of the last update that I got from them. So I'm actually interested in seeing this one myself. So with that, we're going to go ahead and play a update from Stratodesk. And so we all kind of...
Hello, this is Rich Severson. Welcome to the CUGC and Stratodesk presentation. We're going to do a quick overview of what Stratodesk is, or who Stratodesk is, and then we're going to go into some of the technology features. What is Stratodesk? Stratodesk is the leading global innovator in end-user computing management and OS software for VDI endpoints. So what does that mean? So there's No Touch Center, the management platform that's used to manage No Touch OS, a very secure Linux operating system built by Stratodesk specifically for VDI and endpoints. So it's a very secure Linux operating system, No Touch OS. So No Touch Center and No Touch OS combined make No Touch Desktop. That is Stratodesk. So let's go ahead and jump into it. We're going to, like I said, I'm going to do a little bit of PowerPoint, and then I'll show you some of the features. Obviously, we've got limited to 5 minutes, so we're going to go as quickly as we can. All right. With 4.5, we introduced the new role-based access controls, and the new role-based access controls are going to give you the No Touch Center administrator the ability to create different roles, different users, different groups, and give the ability to have specific controls over specific devices, identities, and groups. But the most important thing about this is the fact that it's going to enable us to have true multi-tenancy within No Touch Center. For those that are MSPs and service providers, we're going to want to be able to have multi-tenant architecture within No Touch Center, which of course is part of the reason why we've introduced the No Touch Center REST APIs, where you have the ability to do that and create those via scripted access. Also within No Touch Center 4.5, we introduced multi-factor authentication via RFC 6238. The key thing here is this gives the administrators the ability to control access to No Touch Center using one-time passwords, tokens, authenticator applications, whatever your favorite access security is. So it enhances the security of access to No Touch Center. For those that are even, whether they're public or private instances of No Touch Center, having the ability to introduce and bring this into No Touch Center takes No Touch Center one step further as far as security. Also in the 4.5 release, we've introduced the No Touch Center REST API. This is going to be something that people are going to find very useful. We presume probably the MSPs are going to find this very powerful, but basically it gives us the ability to interact with the No Touch Center using the REST APIs. And in the next slide, you'll see there are several samples of what can be used and the things that are going to be coming within the REST APIs for No Touch Center. Okay, so there you go, right? Obviously, we get the usage of NTCLI. We can set up different names, get different values, provide different features, functions. Basically, anything that you can do within the UI of No Touch Center, you will be able to do with No Touch Center REST API. Okay, This one I'm really proud of is we now have No Touch Center available natively in the Microsoft Azure Marketplace, right? So think about this. So for those customers that are wanting the ability to be able to deploy a cloud-hosted instance of No Touch Center, rather than going through some large exercise of trying to figure out how to import VHDs, etc., you can go to the Microsoft Azure Marketplace, search for Stratodesk, and you'll be able to do that and launch it right there. From there, it'll take probably 2 to 3 minutes. It's a tremendous offering. Custom icons. This is one of the things that people have been asking for a while. Is, in the case where you may have multiple connections, multiple Citrix connections, those kinds of things, you can now put custom icons on those connections to be able to differentiate line of business applications versus CRM type applications, those kinds of things, right? So you have the ability to do full custom application icon support, including favicon support. So for those that are doing browsers and those kinds of things. That's pretty much everything as far as the PowerPoint. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to jump into No Touch Center demonstration. Okay, so what I've done is I've jumped over to No Touch Center and I've kind of shortcutted a little bit here and jumped to the roles-based access control, and I went to the roles and the users. Here you can see I've got an A admin and a B admin, and I've got an A tenant and a B tenant, right? So again, having the different role-based access controls, you can separate those tenants and those users to be able to do that. I'm also going to jump real quick, again, given the fact that we're limited in time, we're going to go to admin as a user. I'm going to go to account settings, and you see here, this is where I can turn on the multi-factor authentication, configure the token one-time passwords. Okay, so that's about all the time we have for today. So sorry for making it so quick, but with a 5 limitation, that's about as far as we can go. So hope that helps. Again, all the new things with No Touch Center 4.5. If you have any questions or anything, certainly let us know. And obviously, all the information is available at the Stratodesk website at stratodesk.com. Thanks and have a great day.
All right. Great little 5-minute intro to Stratodesk, just enough to make you want to go over in the booth and check them out. So definitely make sure to go ahead and do that. So up next, we have Case and we have Rody, and excited for these two gentlemen to be joining us today. Case, from his incredible space that he hand built with his bare hands. Look at that. Look at the wood beams there. There used to be this pink chair you had. Look, you got lighting going on now. You got books and shit. Look at you. Oh, you still got the pink chair. All right.
Yeah,
man,
yeah, absolutely.
You are looking stunning, man. You got the patent back there and stuff, man. Impressive, dude. I love it. Love the setup, man. Rody looking sharp too. It's awesome to have both you guys on today for the South Florida XL CUGC. Really excited about this topic for you guys. This is the deep dive kind of into EUC performance. Just go ahead and take it away. This is kind of the king, right? User experience is king. So best way to get that is optimizing your experience. So let's hear more about it. So take it away.
All right.
Rody just got a new laptop, so he's still getting used to it.
Nah, you're a funny guy. I think everybody is able to see my screen. Yep, we're all good. Go ahead, Case.
So today we've got the pleasure to talk about mastering EUC performance. My name is Kees Bogman, and I'm a technical director for end user computing within Nutanix. And as Shane already introduced, I'm joined with Rody. Rody, do you want to quickly introduce yourself before clicking to the next slide?
Yep. So my name is Rody Kosse. I'm working as a quality engineer at Citrix. I joined recently, so roughly 2 months ago. And before that, I was a consultant in the EUC space and also Citrix CTP. But as I joined Citrix, I needed to give the title back. So yeah, cool to be here.
If you want to progress to the next slide, then we'll talk about kind of the agenda for today. We're going to talk about the differences between measuring user density and user experience. We'll talk about measuring performance between tools that are out there like Log and VSI or Rex Analytics or what was it, work sims as it is today, or sim
loads.
Yep. What was it? Sim load. There you go. We'll share some results of our testing in terms of vCPU ratios, how hardware impacts your performance, RDS or RDSH versus VDI, or multi-user versus single user. We'll talk about security patches and their impact. I know Patrick is on, and he always likes to hear stuff like this. We'll talk about CPU and GPU, and hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A, and otherwise we'll be at a roundtable later on as well. So Rudy, if you want to progress to the next slide, as I wanted to kind of talk about the key takeaways for this session. For us, we've been looking at this for quite some time. Obviously, the topic of performance is kind of key to what both Rody and I do in terms of like the
I think your audio is cutting
ever
out
known
again.
triangle that we have between fast, good, or cheap. Am I back now?
Yeah, you're back.
Can you hear me, Rody?
Yep, you were out for a second.
Okay, not sure. Not sure what happened there, because I'm connected wired. So never mind. So in everything that Rody and I do, we talk about performance and user experience, right? That's our kind of the key thing in our day-to-day job. And we looked at the topic, and we went, well, this is what we see in kind of the three items that you can pick only two from. And one is fast, the other one is good, and the third one is cheap, and you can only pick two. And that's kind of what we've seen throughout our testing as well. So that's kind of the three takeaways of today: fast, good, or cheap, and you can only pick two. Rudy, if you want to progress to the next slide.
Yep. So we're also going to talk about user density and user experience, because these two are quite connected. And it also, user density or user experience, whatever you want, depends also on who you ask. So if you ask a decision maker like a VP or director or of IT, UC or VDI, they want to have a focus on costs, and they look at cost versus benefits. So they really look at how much people can I put per server, so what's my density, and what does that cost per user then. But they are less on the user experience. But if you ask an end user, they only want that big fancy yellow truck which can go 0 to 100 miles in a few seconds, right? They don't care about what it costs because it doesn't involve them, the cost, but they just want to do their job, and they want to do their job as fast as possible, and they want to have the best user experience during that time. So it's always a struggle between those two. So you have to find the right balance here. All right, so before we start with all the different comparisons and the research that we have done, let's first talk about the tools that we use to do these measurements. Kees, can you tell something about Login VSI?
Absolutely. So Login VSI is, I guess, the industry standard for benchmarking. What it will do is it simulates somewhat realistic workloads, and it captures backend data from the host and the VM side and enumerates that into basically two important metrics. One would be the VSI max, which is the maximum number of users a configuration can handle. And the other one is VSI base, and that is application response times. And for VSI max goes, the higher is better. For VSI base goes, the lower is better. So VSI max is the number of users on a single configuration. VSI base is basically a aggregated score for user experience. Again, it takes a lot of the metrics on the host side, on the VM side. It doesn't take account the actual user experience. So if you want to progress to the next slide, Brody.
Yep.
This is basically what Log of VSI would look like from an architectural perspective. It's pretty straightforward. You install or you run the installer. It will open up and deploy a VSI share, which is basically just a file share sitting on a file server. It will contain the management console, an analyzer, and log files. Obviously, you need something to actually launch the sessions on. So that's our launcher configuration. Can be ICHDX or RDP, PCRP, Blast, or any other client. You'll have your test platform based on CVAT services, etc. And you'll need Active Directory for authentication there. From that point on, you'll have predefined workloads in Log and VSI that you can enable to run and schedule for the maximum for the amount of users you want, and then you can actually have a baseline of that score. Now, obviously, this is not the only tool in our pocket. So, Rody, I think you wanted to explain something about Rex.
Yeah. So Rex Analytics, or it's called Simloads now, is quite comparable with Login VSI, but also different on a few points. So Simloads, the name does say it already. It contains different load sets you can run, but it is more about the user experience and the visual quality. So you can compare visual quality side by side between different runs. And you can test many different scenarios. For example, what's the quality difference if you run it on Azure or on-prem or in AWS? And what happens if you change the VM settings? And what if you compare the different vendors to each other? What's the visual quality, for example, if you use it out of the box? And it works with basically all the remoting protocols. And it's a quick and easy way to see the user experience that the end user is really seeing. And it compares the visual stuff, so a video, with metrics. So here you have an example where you have two videos. So you can compare them side by side. And in the bottom of the screenshot, you can see the metrics. So you can compare the CPU usage, GPU usage, or any other metric you can collect on the VM. And you can even create a layover, so you have them both in the same graph. So the CPU from the left side and CPU usage from the right video. You can use an overlay, so it's easier to compare. You will see some videos during this presentation as well made with this tool. So how does that work? Well, with Rex Analytics, you have, of course, an endpoint device, which sets up a remoting session. And it doesn't matter which protocol it uses, because we capture the output of the endpoint device, the video stream, by with a frame grabber or an HDMI capture device, for example. So I'm using an Elgato frame grabber, which just connects with USB to my laptop, but it connects with HDMI to my endpoint. So I can use any endpoint I want, and I don't influence the endpoint with my test. So the endpoint is not, the CPU is not influenced by it. And the endpoint connects to a guest VM, which contains the workloads, so the Simloads, and it contains some tools to collect telemetry data. And all that stuff together can be combined in Rex Analyzer, where you can visualize the data, and you can also import the videos you've created with the HDMI capture device, and you can compare the different scenarios to each other. So it's very, very nice that you can compare on graphical quality, but also on metrics. So let's go in some test results we've collected. Kees, can you talk about how to get the best performance and what's the impact on the different topics?
Yeah, so when we look at these metrics and how to get the best performance, obviously we kind of combined 5 important metrics that we thought were useful to actually look at kind of all the items that we're going over. So one is user experience, because in our vision, user experience should be key. The other one is cost. Manageability, security, and support will all be factored into kind of the choices and the options that we have overall. So first of all, let's start about talking about optimizing the golden image. And although it might seem very obvious and clear, we always talk about the why, because the why has basically 2 kind of key drivers behind this. One is to improve user experience, and the other one would be to reduce resource consumption. Now, improving user experience is something that end users would benefit from, whereas reducing resource consumption is something that the IT staff would have a benefit from, because that means lesser nodes, lesser servers, so that's lesser to manage. But the key thing here, when you optimize your image, is to know what you're doing. Because if we look at the how, there's obviously a lot of options in terms of disabling services, scheduled tasks, remove OneDrive if you're not using it. I've seen cases where the logon would be expanded by 3 minutes just because OneDrive wasn't configured properly. Removing Windows Store apps if you don't need them. Key items here, create a script with your optimizations and use the tools that are available. The BP Analyzer is out there. There's a VMware OS optimization fling. And obviously, Citrix has the Citrix Optimizer, which is a great way of optimizing your desktop. Now, in the next slide, you will find why I mentioned creating a script. Because we did some benchmarking around optimizing your VDI image, and we tested with 1909 as our baseline. Then we ran our optimization, and we saw that there's a 48% density improvement by using a vanilla image versus an optimized image. And then a few weeks later, we ran the same test again, but with a newer version of the Citrix Optimizer. And what we saw was actually an improvement of 57% versus the baseline that we did. And I know both Rodi and myself, we're Dutch. We're known to be very cheap. But in the end, I love free performance. And if this means by running that optimizer, I can get about 50% or 60% higher densities just by optimizing my image, that's a massive impact. So definitely important to optimize your image. Now, we talked about the density. Now, obviously, there's the other end as well, that is user experience. So when we measured the same test from a application responsiveness or a user experience perspective, we actually saw a 5% improvement in the way that applications were responding. So applications are now responding faster to clicks and actions from their end users. And even when we move to the V2 of our optimization template here, we actually saw that it went up with another percent. So in that last test that we ran, Rodi, if you want to click to the next, excuse me, it's even 9%. So going from no optimizations to a fully optimized image not only gave me about 57% better density, it also gave me 9% better UX, so application responsiveness. So talking about pros around optimizing your image, obviously better user experience. We saw that applications were responding faster. And on the back end for IT staffing, higher density, so lower cost. Cons on optimizing your image is that you need to retest optimizations with every new feature release or every new build that you're creating. So from a UX, it's only positive. From a cost, it's positive. Manageability, you need to put in a little bit more effort there. Security needs a little bit more effort. And you might run into support issues when your applications are not fully cooperating with the optimizations you're planning. So keep these things in mind when you look at optimizing your image. Now, the one thing that we're all running into is keeping Windows up to date. So when we look at kind of the update cycle that Microsoft is sort of enforcing on us, we know that we're in this kind of trend of updating our image more and more, faster and faster. So it's good to keep in mind that your Windows build actually makes impact on user density and user experience as well. And that's what we've seen with this particular test. When we first tested in about October 2018, this is basically our benchmark that we had. So 1709 gave us 100%, and then we saw it slowly declining. But the interesting fact is when we ran the same test again in December, we actually saw that Microsoft did a lot of patching and fixing in their density. So as we progressed, when we went to December 2019, we actually saw that Microsoft kind of closed the gap a little bit in terms of the density. Now, my unproven thesis here is that around this time frame, Microsoft released WVD and now Azure Virtual Desktop, and they actually saw their own kind of density differences between these builds. But it's an unproven thesis. I haven't talked to Microsoft about this, but it collides with the release of Windows Virtual Desktop. Now, this is the density part. Obviously, application responsiveness is important here as well. And we saw it fluctuating as well. So this is our October 2018 testing. And then when we move to December 2019, we see Microsoft kind of closing that gap just a little bit, but still impacting your overall density. So if we look at newer numbers, which is the more recent Windows 10 versions, and now even Windows 11, we actually see again a little bit of fluctuation in terms of density. Whereas Windows 11 does have an impact compared to previous Windows 10 versions. So keep that in mind. If you're looking to upgrade, if you're looking to move to newer Windows 10 versions or Windows 11, make sure you have the right tooling in place to measure the impact of the update that you're doing. So keeping Windows up to date, pros. And I noticed that we have a typo on this slide, but pros would be that you're more secure, you've got longer support, and you get access to newer features. Cons might be a lower density, which equals to more hardware to support the same workload, and lower application responsiveness, which impacts user experience. So if we look at the 5 key elements that we defined, user experience goes down, the cost goes up, manageability, you need to kind of put in effort, security and support, you're in the good side of that equation because you have the most updated versions, which equals to better security and better support.
Yeah, so another thing we could look at is what happens if you use more vCPUs per desktop. So what does the vCPU ratio or the number of vCPUs per VM do to your density and to application responsiveness? So again, if we take the 2 vCPU scenario, which is still quite common as the 100%, we see that if we go to 3 vCPU, our density drops with 12%. And if we go to 4, you lose another 7%, and we drop to 81% in total. And if you go to 5 vCPU per VM, there's even a further drop to 77%. So it's good to see what you need in terms of vCPU use per VM. If you look at your application work set. But yeah, again here, it's the balance. Because if we look with the same set to application responsiveness, we can see there's a nice increase in application responsiveness by 5% if we only add 1 vCPU. So 3 vCPUs makes quite sense to do these days. So you get better app responsiveness for, well, you you drop some in density, but the users in the end will be a little bit more happy. And the steps to 4 or even 5 vCPUs don't bring that much into in terms of app responsiveness. It will only add 1%, but the density will drop more significantly. So we can even show the difference when you add more vCPUs per desktop. So let's do an end user experience test. We ran it on my hardware a while back, and I hope you can see the video playing. So on the left side, we have the 2 vCPU scenario running, and on the right side, we have a 4 vCPU scenario running. Well, both run at a decent frame rate, but you can see that there's a massive difference in CPU usage. As we have more vCPUs on the right hand side, so the green area, we have CPU cycles to be used by other applications if we, for example, play a video. So you can really see that the user experience gets better because, yeah, if you play a video on one screen and you're working on something on the other screen, you don't want to have an influence by the video on your other applications. But you can also replace the video by any other application that uses quite some CPU cycles. So if we look at the pros and cons, well, with more vCPUs, you have better application responsiveness, so happier users. But of course, it lowers your density and you need more hardware. So yeah, it will increase cost, but it will definitely increase the user experience as well. Okay, so, we have seen some vulnerabilities in the past hitting the CPU quite well. Can you tell us something about that?
No, absolutely. Like we've all been through the phases of Spectre, Meltdown, Foreshadow, and MBS. We saw vulnerabilities being mitigated with updates on the BIOS, firmware, hypervisor level, Windows OS level, and even just updates having impact on density. So when we first got into kind of the motion of the Spectre Meltdown, and that's what we have in the next slide. When we tested with all the mitigations applied.
Case, your audio is a bit weird.
Is it chunky again?
Well, it's crackling. Yeah, there's static through it.
Oh, interesting. Let me do this. Hopefully the audio team.
Oh. I think we lost Case somewhere. We'll give him a sec to reconnect. Otherwise, I will continue. Ah, there he comes again. We lost you, Case.
Yeah, I was switching audio, and then the webinar said that I couldn't connect to my devices. Am I better now in terms of audio?
Yeah, you're much clearer. Wow.
Sorry that happened. So when you progress to the next slide, as we're losing time because of my crappy audio, what we've done is we tested density with mitigations applied, and that was our baseline. That was our 100%. And when we disabled Spectrum, Meltdown, and L1TF, we saw that there's a 40% improvement in density. Now, looking at application responsiveness in the next slide, we actually saw that there's a about 10% delta between mitigations being applied and disabling Spectrum, Meltdown, L1TF. So the base foundation of kind of this section of our deck is that security patches, it's something that we need to do. It's something that is mandatory. We cannot avoid them, but it's something that actually impacts our density and user experience as well. Now, it's not always the case, because when we tested the Windows 10 CVE that is mentioned here, we actually saw, based on the slides that are following next, is that actually improved our density by about 3%, and it improved our application responsiveness in the next slide with about 5%. So overall, it doesn't have to be that mitigations or vulnerability mitigations are always impacting performance in a negative way. It actually helps in a positive way as well in some cases. So again, looking at the 5 metrics that we've defined before, if we look at pros, that would be, now I'm losing Rody. Better application responsiveness, happier users, higher density. Cons of disabling these mitigations will be lower security and support. So overall, make sure that you follow these guidelines and rules, as they will help you secure your perimeter, secure your environment, but it also will impact user density overall. Now, one of my favorite topics is the one that that will follow next, and that is the topic of RDSH versus VDI. This is a everlasting conversation that I'm having with a lot of our customers, a lot of our field teams, and we've tested Windows 10 1909 with all of the updates at that point in time versus Windows 16 with all of these updates, with CVAD 1912 LTSR. This is what we saw. So our baseline was VDI was a single user 100%. Versus multi-user, that was a 42% delta in terms of density. So we got 42% more users on the same box using RDSH. Now, I know the question on your mind would be, what about user experience? What about application responsiveness? Obviously, we've tested that as well. And here's what we got. We actually saw that the RDSH platform was actually performing 29% better than the single user platform on a application responsiveness perspective. Now, we took a look at this, and we suspect that it has to do with single threaded apps. But overall, higher density, better UX with RDSH. So that's something that kind of surprised me. Now, if we look at the 5 metrics that we've defined before, again, pros of using RDSH versus VDI, better application responsiveness, so happier users, higher density. It might support limited use cases if you need user installed apps, if you need admin rights for whatever crappy application you still have left there, and maybe support, because not every application will support a server OS. So that's the RDSH versus VDI impact or piece. And I think, Rody, you wanted to talk about the impact of upgrading your hardware.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So when you're looking for new hardware, it doesn't make sense to go always for the latest generation. And is there a massive difference? So what we've done here is compared the Intel Broadwell versus a Skylake versus Cascade Lake. Well, there are newer generations now out, but we've set these 3 on a row, and well, it's for starters, it's hard to compare them 100% equal, because, for example, the Broadwell we used was a 14 core at 2.4 gigahertz. But that isn't available with Skylake or Cascade Lake. So you need to play around with the number of cores and the gigahertz, so this clock speed. But yeah, it's comparable. So if we look at the density first, and we take Broadwell, the oldest generation, as the 100%, we see a 30% increase in performance in density when you move over to Skylake. And we're at a lower clock speed there, but we have 2 more cores. But if we look at Cascade Lake, we even go further. So there's a 40% increase compared to Skylake, and even a 70% increase compared to Broadwell. So the Cascade Lake has 4 cores more, but it runs at 200 megahertz slower, but it gives you 70% more density just by going to the latest generation. And if you look at app responsiveness, we see the same significant increase. So from Broadwell to Skylake, there's 10% extra app responsiveness. And if we go to Cascade Lake, you get another 3%. Just by going to the latest generation. So if you're looking for acquiring new hardware, make sure to look at the latest generations because they just give that extra few percent of density and responsiveness. So if we look at the pros and cons, you will get better application responsiveness, higher density, which also means less hardware. But there are for sure some cons. You need new hardware, and the cost could also be higher per generation, especially now with the chip shortage. The cost could up quite significantly. But it's good to look at the latest generations for sure. And if we look at one of the latest generations, well, it's the second generation of the Intel scalable processors. Intel launched a refresh series. So the processor number ends with an R for refresh. And what we see there is that Intel saw AMD coming close. And what I just did was dropping the price. So here you can see a comparison. So for a 20 core running at 2.5 gigahertz versus a 18 core running at 3.1 gigahertz versus the latest refresh series, which is a 20 core running at 3.1 gigahertz. The refresh series is actually almost $500 to $1,300 cheaper per unit than the non-refresh series, and you get more cores and a higher clock speed for it. So thanks AMD for pushing Intel to lowering their prices as well. So here you can see that competition is good for pricing. So what if we add GPU hardware acceleration to the mix? So we have already talked about all the different options, but GPUs are an interesting thing as well. And GPUs can not only be used for high-end workloads, but also for offloading videos or other stuff that can run on the GPU. Well, even if you open your start menu, for example, in Windows, it will use the GPU to render that. So if we look at GPU hardware acceleration, currently the biggest player is NVIDIA. And they have something called vGPU. And with vGPU, you can slice a GPU in several pieces virtually, just like you do with a CPU. The only difference is you can't overcommit the memory. So it's based on how much memory you give per VM. And that in essential, gives the amount of VMs you can run per GPU. So if you have 16 gigabytes, you give 1 gigabyte per VM, you can run 16 VMs on these GPUs. And you will install a special piece of software, the virtualization software, into your hypervisor. You can add a GPU to every VM, and in the VM you will install the NVIDIA graphics driver. So if we look at what it brings in terms of user experience, Lakeside did a research in 2017 where they compared the non-GPU versus a GPU scenario, and they saw that users gave a fair to good user experience if they didn't have a GPU, and a good to excellent user experience if they had a GPU. Well, there's quite some bandwidth in this test, but with a GPU, you get a better user experience. And I can show you that as well. So in the next test, I'm going to show you we've added a GPU to one VM, and the other VM is just a vCPU scenario. So the top left corner is the 2 vCPU scenario, and the top right corner has a GPU added to it. Well, both are running at a decent FPS. So they are basically both running at 30 FPS. I limited it to 30 FPS. So the user experience isn't that bad, you would say. But if we look at the metrics, and that's an important one as well, the CPU in the 2 vCPU scenario is completely filled with decoding the YouTube video and encoding it again to send it to the user. While on the other hand, if we look at the GPU scenario, you can see that the CPU is only utilized with, well, 30% or something. So it does still use CPU, but yeah, 60 to 70% less CPU cycles needed when you add a GPU to something like a video. But this is also true for other applications that rely on the GPU, so 3D applications, but even applications like PowerPoint use the GPU, and you can offload the CPU by adding a GPU. So what are the pros and cons? Well, of course, you will increase the application responsiveness and make the users more happy if you add a GPU. You can also run more apps on your platform, like 3D intensive, graphic intensive applications. But there are some cons as well. So you will lower the density because it depends on how many GPUs you can fit into a server and what GPU profile you give every VM. It could lower the density compared to a CPU scenario only. Luckily, for example, NVIDIA is bringing the A16 out this year, where you can go up to 128 users with a 1 GB profile, or even I think 169 or 96 users if your host can run so many GPUs. So the user density becomes less a problem, but the costs are higher, of course. You add components to it. So you will increase the user experience, but you will also increase the cost. And there's more to manage. So not only your platform, but you also have now drivers in your hypervisor and your guest OS. And you need licenses. So you need a license server. You need to buy licenses. So that will increase the manageable stuff. Another interesting topic is changing or tweaking the display protocol. And there are many display protocols out there with many different settings and terms and stuff you can do. But it really depends on the situation you're in, what the application load set is, what you're trying to achieve with it. And it makes sense to tweak it. Because if we compare here protocol A versus protocol B, with a optimized scenario, which is A, which is 100%, and an unoptimized scenario, which is protocol B, you can get a difference in density up to 40% even. So if, for example, if you are in the Citrix world, you're using a high-end 3D graphics application and you don't set optimize for the 3D graphics, the CPU usage will be much higher, and that will hit your density quite well. And also, if we look at application responsiveness, you will see an increase if you select the right encoder settings. But it depends, and it depends on your situation, your applications, and network conditions. So it's hard to say which you should choose, but test with all the different options. So, Kees, can you give us the 3 key takeaways again?
Yeah, absolutely. So our 3 key takeaways from this session is fast, good, or cheap. You can pick 2. And keep that in mind when you're architecting, sizing, or designing a new environment. That you can't have all 3. You cannot have all 3. So pick the 2 that suits you best, and keep in mind that we're now in this everlasting upgrade cycle. So make sure that you know the impact of whatever's coming at you. For now, thank you, Rody, for being such an awesome co-host and being patient with my audio issues.
Yeah, I'm always patient with you. So thanks for having us here, and have a great day.
Yay! That was good. Performance is fun. Dun, dun, dun. Is everyone ready? No? All right. Well, because right now we've got ZTIM and their technical intro, their little 5-minute thing. So we'll go ahead and cut to that.
Hello, everyone. I'm Omar Keshrid, VP of Business Development at ZTeam. In case you were wondering, I'm the older guy on the photo wearing a hat. ZTeam is proud to sponsor another wonderful CUGC event. As a sponsor, we want to welcome everyone to visit our booth and check out our secure edge tools to complement secure cloud workspaces. You'll find that while we specialize in thin client endpoints, we do go beyond with several tools to improve security and performance. Central to our offering is our ZOS endpoint operating system. ZOS is a completely hardened read-only operating system. It is purpose-built and tuned for cloud apps and desktops with only necessary packages present and running completely segregated from one another, hence completely secure. Users are unable to do anything locally on the device, and all control is given to admins in zero-touch manner via the zconf management tool. Our goal is to keep management simple, but at the same time offer all of the configuration, reporting, and remote controls required. Devices can be managed from anywhere with our secure gateway, which comes standard with zconf. With ZTeam, customers can choose to use any PC, old or new, or procure hardware from ZTeam. Since the solution is software-defined, we give the freedom to repurpose or convert the hardware of your choice using our Z-Transformer tool. Beyond the endpoint-specific offering, ZTeam is taking this further when it comes to security, authentication, and performance with several unique tools. For accessing virtual workspaces, ZTeam makes it super simple with ZKey, an uncopyable, secure USB for storing user credentials. Functioning like a credit card, the user simply inserts the USB and enters a PIN, and all of the login information is made available as soon as apps or websites are accessed. Disconnection from the virtual workspace is immediate as soon as the USB is removed. Security can be further enhanced with ZOTP for multi-factor authentication. This solution can be on-prem as well as cloud-based, and a variety of authentication mechanisms can be put in place for any app in use. Finally, when users are in session, one of the challenges that is often faced revolves around printing, and as such, we've developed a comprehensive tool to compress print jobs up to 30 times, virtualize all printer drivers, and centralize printer management, no longer requiring print servers. As a vendor with a deep history around Citrix and virtual workspace platforms, we're able to be a one-stop shop for multiple challenges that you may face, allowing for unrivaled security, ease of management, and performance. Be sure to stop by our booth to view our live demos as well as get your fully featured free licenses. My team and I will be available on chat, so feel free to ask us any questions. We look forward to connecting with you. With ZTeam, you now have all the elements to gain security, simplify management, and provide users a seamless and enjoyable experience, all from one single vendor. ZTeam, not just an endpoint.
Well, that's awesome. Cool. Everyone likes a good endpoint, and I'm excited to see some of that print stuff. I've got a customer right now that's got all kinds of print challenges, so maybe that could help them be more better. All right, our next sponsor and our next presenter will be Login VSI, showing us all the goodies.
Hey there, this is Blair Parkhill, and I'm on the product management team here at Login VSI. I wanted to quickly introduce you to the concept of shift-left testing and how it can dramatically reduce production issues related to your digital workspace solutions. As I'm sure you're aware, the technology stack for workspace solutions is very complex and can take years to master an optimal working condition. But just because you were able to get it working optimally doesn't mean it will stay that way, as any and all of the components in the technology stack can change on a frequent basis. It's our nature to consume change slowly because it feels safe. But when it comes to software, safety lies in staying current. Staying current means digesting changes on an almost daily basis. In 2019 alone, the Windows 10 operating system had over 1,200 changes, and that pace is only picking up and has probably doubled on an annual basis by now. Shift-left testing refers to an organization's ability to consume as much change as possible during a development cycle. This helps to reduce the opportunity for a change to break the system when it has been pushed to production, where these breaks can cost the organization a lot more money. In a modern DevOps solution, it's common for an application to follow a continuous integration, continuous development cycle, or CI/CD. With continuous workspace engineering, the same applies. As an example, you can test a new version of Windows with all of your productivity and business critical applications in a quick application compatibility test. In less than 10 minutes, you can determine which applications still work with the update and which ones do not. Once the desktop images are solid, you can then see how these changes will stack up from a performance perspective. Every service branch release of Windows will have a performance impact on the underlying solution, and in most cases, the update will require more resources to run. To find out just how much different the performance is, a quick single-host load test can show you if the update is faster or slower than before, giving you an opportunity to perform optimizations and speed the image up. Once the image is fully compatible with apps and runs quickly, it's not a bad idea to perform some user acceptance testing by diving deeper into the applications to make sure they're not only compatible, but have also not introduced any issues with your users' workflows. The next step is to then test the updates at scale, which will surface bottlenecks in the system throughout the entire technology stack. At this point, you have now consumed all of the changes for this given period, you've mitigated any compatibility and performance issues, and you're ready to push these changes to production with confidence. Of course, there are factors in everyday life that can impact performance and availability, like data center utilization, network utilization, changes ISPs have made, and other updates that happen outside of your development process. The best way to catch these before they become a problem is to push lightweight testing to the edge. By running tests from predetermined locations outside of the data center, it's possible to catch issues and deal with them before they impact your remote production workforce. As an example, let's take a look at the performance of a cloud desktop, where testing was started Friday afternoon and run continuously over the weekend and into Monday to observe the performance during low utilization versus Monday morning's high utilization. You can see that the login times increased slightly over the weekend, but during Monday morning's rush, login times dramatically increased and became very spiky over that time. So maybe you'd like to know how Login VSI can help. Login VSI has been a standard in the VDI test and benchmarking market for over 10 years. Our virtual users and Login Enterprise testing platform make it easy for you to do your continuous workspace engineering without the need for real users. In fact, you can do your application compatibility testing to see which applications aren't running or aren't running fast enough. Load testing to see how many sessions your solution can accommodate before performance tapers off. And continuous production testing to be the first to know if logon times or application performance and availability have been impacted, all with Login Enterprise. In less than an hour, you can have tests running against your desktop and application resources. That's all for now, but if you'd like to join us for the Login VSI Summit on September 30th, I guarantee you won't be disappointed. We've got some industry greats presenting this year, including the EUC OG himself, Brian Madden, and of course, yours truly. See you then.
All right. Well, that was good. I always like Login VSI. It's being able to know how many people can fit on a server is very, very important. And so now we're all going to head to the roundtables. So that means you got to do a little clicky to make it happen. and we will see you there. And just like we've talked about before, we've got 2 of them. We've got the, let's see, what is it? The Zero Trust one with Dan the Man, and Mastering EUC Performance with Keys and Rody. So if y'all want to head to those, we will see y'all back here in just a little bit. Let's see, because that's what, 30 minutes? Let me... the roundtables 255. Yep. So yeah, 25 minutes and some change. All right. We'll see y'all at the roundtables. Y'all have fun and see you in a little bit.